feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer.
I don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college rule.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm Chris. This is Dom. We're a couple of comics who love sports, and that's what this podcast is all about. Do me a favor, give that like button a little kiss, give that comment a little lick, and you know what? Give serious thought to following us. You know what I'm saying? We are just, like I said, a couple of comics. We're always recording right here at Engle Studio down in Tucson, Arizona. Who we got today?
Chris, we got a hurricane coming up.
Oh, man, we got a iron hurricane. Those things don't make sense, but that's a great combo.
Ditka versus a hurricane.
Ditka.
But the name of the hurricane is Hurricane Ditka. So we're talking about Mike Ditka, everybody. Mike Ditka, born October 18th, 1939. Ditka wasn't even his last name.
Oh,
no. If you saw that.
Yeah,
was,
I didn't know that.
Disco. That's his. I don't know.
Well, Disco sucks.
Yep.
So.
Disco Demolition.
That's right.
His dad ended up changing it to make it easier to pronounce. Good for you. Good for you.
Very Ellis Island of you.
Yes. Born in Carnegie, Pennsylvania. Grew up in Aliquippa. Basically your western PA steel town there in the early 20th century.
Yes, very blue collar, very,
Melting potty.
That's it. Oh, that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said he grew up in one of the more diverse towns in America in that era.
Just a steel town guy on a Saturday night, Chris.
That's right.
That's right. Great at sports growing up, obviously. Was a sports star at Aliquippa High School. His basketball coach, oddly enough, someone whose son we did an episode on. I don't know if you saw that. Press Maravich.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
at
yeah.
Aliquippa
Sure.
High School. Yeah.
Sure, that makes sense.
Played baseball, basketball, and football. The team doctor for the football team,
Yep.
John L. Miller, used to take him to Pitt games. And, this high school is actually interesting. Two other Hall of Famers went to this Pro Football Hall of Famers, Ty Law and Darrell Revis.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, but ends up wanting to go to Pitt.
Well, his team doctor really encouraged him to go to Pitt and become a dentist.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like football.
Well, in those days,
it was just a game. You know what I mean?
You could make probably comparable money as a dentist.
Oh, yeah.
In the late 50s, early 60s.
He said that was his original plan. He got to college and immediately knew it was too hard and switched to history. I don't know if you saw that, which I was like, oh, that is such a great move.
Well, I mean, he's got to stay eligible, right? And he's playing 3 sports in college. I don't know if you saw he's an outfielder on the baseball team.
Yep.
Forward on the basketball team. And he was an intramural wrestling champion.
I was going to say, he did a little wrestling with the boys, too.
Could you imagine, like, a varsity athlete at a D1 school just being like, no, it's cool, I want to play intramural this year. And something I'm not even going to
It's something I'm not, yeah.
I'm just doing this as a hobby.
Just going to throw you kids around.
But it was a two-way end as far as along the line of scrimmage and defense and a pass catcher. I remember intramural athletics in college. I don't think I played intramural anything with a BAC under 1.5, the legal limit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, let's be honest.
Yep. You're like, you show up, you're just like, no, he's the drunken master.
So from 58 to 60, dominant player for Pitt. Absolute dominant player for them.
Well, and this is the era in which being super athletic just makes you that much more dominant because he is dominant on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. And by senior year, he's team captain. He was a first-team unanimous All-American on both sides of the football.
Well, tight end, linebacker, defensive end, punter.
Yes, I love that part.
Just saying. So he was the best athlete in his school.
It's like Bobby Lane and Norm Van Brocklin. You put your best kicker back there. It doesn't matter who it is.
You got to put your number one guy.
Such a successful college career, though, I did want to point out, in 1986, elected to the College Football Hall of Fame.
Yep.
His number 89 was retired by Pitt, and in 2018, for their Hall of Fame class, he was part of the inaugurating Hall of Fame class for them. So, very important player in the history of the Pitt Panthers. 1961, he's drafted twice.
Yeah, once because we don't have one league at this time.
There's no common draft.
We have 2 leagues, and they're both just vying for it. So He gets drafted by the Bears 8th overall, but he also gets drafted by the Oilers, and he chooses the Bears.
Well, I mean, he's got, and when you're a 6'3", 228-pound end, now they're finally starting to realize, oh, we can pass it to these guys in line now. And Mike Ditka, most people associate him with his coaching career or his, personality or Saturday Night Live type of thing. But he revolutionized the tight end position in the NFL almost like Gronk, dude.
Well,
like what he was doing was like what Gronk did when he came into the league.
Well, he said if he didn't go to the Bears, he would have started on defense.
Yeah.
Like that's what he thought. He thought he was going to get drafted to be a defensive player. I think his senior year in Pitt, he said he caught the ball like 12 times.
Yeah.
His first year for the Bears, he caught the ball like 58 times. So exactly what you said, it's almost like a new position where they're just like, oh yeah, he's taller than the defensive player, so we can almost just throw it up to him.
And faster
And stronger, so he's going to be harder to tackle. There's so many of these things that you're just like, oh yeah, he's a better player.
I can't imagine, though, if he went to the AFL, like how disgusting his stats would be, like how much better, like throwing like he goes to the Oilers, like George Blanda tossing him the ball.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
But his first year at Chicago in 61, over 1,000 yards receiving, 12 tutties, rookie of the year. You know how many games he played in? Because the regular season at that time was 14 games.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
I was just going to say, I think he played in all the games, which it's still, you look at his stats and you're just like, oh yes, just right out of the gate, he's just dominant.
You watch highlights of him and just how overmatched these defenders are. Most of these defenses had never seen someone like him.
Exactly.
Like, it just never seen it.
Well, tight ends were literally there to block.
They were just an extra offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Following year, makes a Pro Bowl again, 904 yards, 5 touchdowns. And then we get into 1963 because the Packers have won the last 2 NFL titles.
Mm-hmm.
Bears go 11-1-2. He has a game this year, October 13th, 4 touchdowns in a game. You know who does that? Al Bundy at Polk High School.
That's right.
Mike Ditka did that in the NFL, everybody.
Versus the Rams, and I think it's still for Bears tight ends. I don't think that's going to get broken.
It's tied for the most by tight ends throughout the league.
Yeah.
Like for a single game. Makes the Pro Bowl, first team All-Pro. Almost 800 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns. And they make the NFL championship game.
That's right.
In 63. They play the Giants at Wrigley Field and win 14-10.
I saw it was at Wrigley. I was like, that's a great. You don't see that anymore.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, so they end up becoming NFL champs.
Yeah. In 64, makes another Pro Bowl. 65 makes another Pro Bowl. He's essentially, this is the window of his career where he's the best tight end probably the league has ever seen.
Yes.
To this point.
Well, you see him almost getting like 900 yards, you know, like he definitely is that dominant position. I saw in 66, he decked a fan trying to rush onto the field. Did you ever see that highlight? It's pretty wild.
Ditka. This is a classic Ditka.
It's pretty wild.
Kind of a down year, though, in 66. Made the Pro Bowl his first 5 years.
Yes, 5 straight.
Won an NFL title. Has some issues with management and his head coach because George Halas does everything in that organization and is a notoriously cheap person. So,
well, like he said, I think in his second year or something like this, he knew how bad it was going to be because he asked them for, I think he was getting paid like $12,000 with like a $3,000 bonus,
making less than a dentist would.
Exactly. And then he asked for $18,000 and he was just like, oh no, you're going to get paid whatever, like $14,000. He just goes, that would be a pay decrease. So Ditka was like getting ready to walk out and he had a contract waiting there.
Yeah.
Like ready for him to sign at what he wanted. And he was just like, oh, you had this ready to go. You were just literally trying.
He's haggling.
Literally trying to chisel me, your best player. Like, it's brutal.
I mean, that reminder, if you listen to our Kurt Flood episode, this is the time in professional sports where the winds of change are blowing, but it's still reserve clause.
It's still
where
reserve
they could
clause, yep.
sign you in perpetuity, regardless of what you think, regardless if you've outperformed your rookie deal, like Ditka obviously had by the end of his rookie season.
Yep.
That year in 66, 32 catches, 378 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He referred to House. He had a great quote about him.
Yep.
He throws around nickels like manhole covers.
Because he really was a cheap. He was head coach and owner. So
And general manager.
It was all of it.
I mean, he's Papa Bear for a reason.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true. But
the family-owned franchises in the NFL, when you look around the league, their wealth is all tied up in the team.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they're Jerry Jones, like with oil and things like that, where they buy a team as something to put in their portfolio. Their entire portfolio is the team.
Yeah.
So, and normally they're not very terrific franchises.
No,
they're well run.
historically not.
Historically not. But anyway, on a big moment though, before the 67 season on February 8th. If you're interested, go listen to our AFL episode and the AFL-NFL merger.
Because a lot of things happened right here in this little offseason.
And we mentioned Ditka probably in that episode too, because this is very important. After the Buffalo Bills have their kicker, Pete Gogolak, poached by the New York Giants, a number of AFL owners, including Commissioner, I believe at the time, Al Davis, said, "Oh, thank you. Because you know what we can do? A lot of these guys we drafted before the common draft era, we still hold their draft rights and can sign them to futures contracts."
Yep.
And Ditka is still
under for the
these rights
Oilers.
are for the Oilers.
Yeah.
So he ends up signing a $300,000 contract with a $50,000 signing bonus.
Yep.
Which more commiserate with his productivity than Chicago.
Exactly.
So by that point, though, House has had enough. The Bears can't. Well, they can afford him. They just don't want to afford him more than anything. And on April 26, 1967, he's traded to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 4th-round pick in 1968 and quarterback Jack Concannon, because it was a trade because the Eagles tight end Pete Retzlaff had retired and the Bears quarterback Rudy Bukic had just retired.
That's right. So it was like a bit of a, we need that position, you need this position, but not great.
The Eagles picked up the Oilers tab too.
Yes.
So they traded for that contract. And 60...
He did keep his signing bonus.
He did keep his
I
signing
saw
bonus,
that, which I thought was interesting because there's so much in that era of like, well, I mean, they gave it to you.
Yeah,
but
like screwing him over. But as awesome as he was with the Bears, this stint in Philadelphia almost destroyed his career as a player because of how, and we did an episode on this, how shitty they were.
Okay, and I'll tell you this because I had never known this. Ditka said this where he just goes, I didn't have a drinking problem. We were so bad in this era, I started drinking a lot more. And I was just like, that's actually hilarious because 67, he kind of gets injured a little bit. And he's just like, yeah, we were so bad. And this was the other thing he said. He was like, I was convinced this was the end of my career.
Yeah.
I was sure like this was it. This isn't like an NFL today where like you kind of get picked. It's like, no. Teams don't go around picking up wily veterans.
No, you were just finished. And when you're cast off to a place as bad as Philadelphia was, because like they were so bad they would make you drunk enough to boo Santa Claus. I mean, you would throw snowballs at Santa Claus because you were so.
And there's not even any
angry.
Jews in Philadelphia to hate Santa. These are God-fearing Christians hating Santa. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Flipadelphia.
This is crazy. But he said he thought this was going to be literally his downfall. 67, he actually backs up Jim Kelly.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. We were just like,
he was a backup in Philly the whole time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But 68, 13 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns, and in the season finale, they don't get O.J. Simpson. They boo Santa.
We know. Yeah, we know. We know that they don't get O.J. So he thinks his career is over.
And then he's thrown a life preserver by a very important man. Someone whose name graces a middle school in Arlen, Texas.
That's right.
Tom Landry.
Tom Landry, the once great Texan. Well, this is
January 28, 1969.
He
the
gets
Eagles
traded.
him to Dallas.
And going from the Eagles to Dallas, he gets a call from Tom Landry. And because he thinks his career's kind of over, he thinks he's done. He's the backup in one of the worst teams. And this is exactly what he said. Tom said, is he goes, I'll bet on you if you bet on yourself.
Which is
So, like, literally, he was just like, I still think you're good, but if you don't, it doesn't really matter. And then he said it was going to Dallas was almost like the second half of his career, if you will.
I mean, granted, he's still a backup.
He is, but it's
the
still,
team is not awful.
The team's not awful, and it's this pathway into what his next career in football
It's a perfect segue, yeah.
Exactly. That's what he said, because he was like, it wasn't my glory days with the Bears, but it was that thing of being like, oh, I can do this in football going forward.
He's learning from the sidelines, essentially. So 69, they make the playoffs. 70, they make the Super Bowl. They lose. And then in 71, he set a Cowboys record for 30 catches for a tight end. He had 360 yards and a touchdown. And they make it all the way to Super Bowl VI. And then Super Bowl VI, January 16th, 1972, he has a 7-yard touchdown catch in the fourth quarter to ice the game against the Dolphins. Even had a 17-yard run on an end around.
I saw that, which I was like, oh, that is so, because they really did use him in this little like patch kind of play area where you're like, that's so great.
Landry used to have gadgets, though.
Yes, he used
all
to.
The time.
Yes, he used to have little schemes up. As you know what I mean.
So it plays one more year for Dallas, but by spring of 73, he's retired. I did want to add about his playing career. His 427 catches at retirement were the most in NFL history as a tight end. He had almost over 5,800 yards receiving, 43 touchdown catches. In an era where the passing game was
not. Yes.
Yeah. If he was in the league now.
Well, that's literally what you said when you suggested him. You were just like, he changed a position. He proved to the NFL that you were just like, oh, not only should we have this, it's a detriment if we don't.
Yeah. He was, and because of this, in 1988, he was the first tight end elected to the NFL Hall of Fame, which I thought was
awesome.
Yeah, and deserve it.
Right, yes.
Yeah. And then beginning in 73, what does he do? He just joins up with the Cowboys.
Yeah, he
just brings him on the staff.
Becomes the wide receiver coach, becomes the, it's interesting because it really was that lane of being like, you're not our starter, but you know all of our schemes coming in, you know all of what everybody should do, like receivers.
Yeah. He was an assistant coach from 73 to 1981. In this era, the team made 8 postseason trips in the 9 years, 6 NFC East won 6 NFC East titles, and 3 NFC titles. They went to the Super Bowl 3 times. And they won in 1977. Do you know what his last game with the Cowboys was?
No.
The Dwight Clark catch game.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In 81.
In 81.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this one, which because I just pop on little videos of him talking about it. He said he was just like, I loved coaching for the Cowboys. That was amazing being an assistant coach. I've always wanted to be a head coach. And his wife said, like, well, who do you want to coach? He was just like, well, the Bears. That's my only.
Yeah.
That's like, he was like talking about how much he loved the Bears. And she just goes, why don't you call them and just say that and say, hey, if there's a head coaching position, I would like to be, like considered for it. And then because this was like.
He wrote a letter to George Halas.
Yep. And this was like a little bit before, which it still blows my mind that how, like, off of all of their whatever controversy, because like you don't even know if these quotes were true from back in the day because they're like the nickel, manhole. You don't even know if they're technically true, but to like for him to like write this letter to Halas and be like, I want to be the coach, and then let's get into what happens.
All right, so after 1981, the Bears, since that NFL title in 63, have been absolute trash.
Yes.
I mean, excluding Walter Payton being drafted in, I think, 75, and, like, basically him willing the team to 2 early-round playoff exits, obviously. But
they were horrible.
It was bad. The defense is starting to come around for Chicago around this time, and by the 1982 season, even though Neil Armstrong, not the moon guy, but the head coach for the Bears, gets fired, They need a new head coach.
Yep.
The guys on defense want Buddy Ryan, who's their defensive coordinator. They end up keeping him because they wrote a letter to Hallis so that he would keep him.
Yep.
But they hire Mike Ditka in 1982.
And this is, I don't think there's another team that could say this as essentially the offensive head coach.
Yes.
Because Buddy Ryan is the defensive head coach.
We've talked about Buddy before on this podcast.
Oh, man, is he a problem?
He's a fun guy. Man of his time, Chris.
Fun guy. Great defensive schemes.
Great defensive schemes with the 46 until the playoffs. Well, not when he's with Chicago, but I guess when Ditka came in, he had like a team meeting.
Yeah.
He was like, look, if you do exactly what I say, we're going to go to the Super Bowl in 3 years. But a lot of you are not going to be here.
Which it's a very dickhead thing to say, but he literally was saying, it was just like, I'm not telling individual players they're not going to be here. I'm saying if you're not putting the work in, you're not going to be here.
Think about where the only place in the NFL he had coached previously. Dallas with Landry. And that entire structure of, we go to the Super Bowl a lot.
And the propane empire.
Well, I mean, obviously, right? You were a cowboy during the Landry years.
During the Landry.
Sweet Jethro Pugh.
And they pick up a toodaloo. I can't even do that.
Kalaiki Ali, my
Dale.
wife's Polynesian.
Oh, Dale. My favorite character. Everybody's too, though. So
82 and 83 are a bit of a struggle, but in 82 they draft Jim McMahon to be their quarterback, and by this point, Jim Finks, Bill Tobin, and their scouting department is building a Leviathan. Go back and look at, if when we're done with the podcast, go look at their 83 draft class.
Oh, yeah.
That is almost all the nuts and bolts of both sides of the ball.
I was going to say, when a team really drafts like their core team, and you're just like, whoa, that guy too?
Everyone knows that draft is the quarterback draft, but that is the draft where the Bears just solidify everything.
Nice.
So 84, they win the NFC Central. They go to the NFC title game, but McMahon's hurt, and they get shut out by the 49ers, which sets up 1985, where, not only does Ditka win Coach of the Year, they beat essentially everyone on their schedule. They finish 15-1. They're Super Bowl shuffling. Ditka's getting a DUI this year.
Yep.
Buddy Ryan's being a jacket. The only game they lost all year in, December 2nd, Monday Night Football. Dan Marino's quarterback, and exposes the 46 defense for its inability to play pass coverage against multiple receivers.
Well, and they say, why doesn't everybody else do this? And you're just like, everybody else doesn't have Dan Marino. And
the Marks brothers.
Yes. It's one of those things where you're just like, yeah, the Dolphins were able to cut that open, but nobody else is going to do that.
There was not an offense in the league that could do that, to spread them out and have enough protection and Marino throw it as quickly as he does.
Exactly.
So they had a big fight at halftime, Ditka and Buddy, because why wouldn't you? Yelling,
why wouldn't,
that's your IQ, buddy, 0.
Why wouldn't Buddy just get so angry? He's the defensive head coach. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think of that dynamic in Chicago, because they were such a winning team at this time.
Yeah, they just roll through their entire schedule. In the divisional round in the NFC Championship, they outscored the Giants and Rams 45-0. And then against New England, this is the biggest blowout to date for the Super Bowl. They win 46-10, January 26, 1986. The only regret he said about that game was not getting Walter Payton his touchdown, but he's a Super Bowl champion as a head coach and a player. He won an NFL title as a player. He won a Super Bowl as an assistant coach.
As an assistant coach, yeah.
Which is fantastic. And then
so technically he does have 2-2.
Yeah.
Which I just right now.
Yeah. But you would think, though, and this is kind of where detractors come in, you would think that they're set up to be a dynasty, right?
Yep.
They had everything working for them.
15-1 with how dominant they were in the playoffs it just really is one of those teams that you're like, how does this team not at least have one more Super Bowl appearance in the next 2 years? You know what I mean?
They didn't even make it back They won, I think, only one, and we'll get into the playoff.
This is what I mean. Is it really was one of the biggest drop-offs?
So 86, they win the NFC Central again, and 87 they do as well. Unfortunately, in both seasons, Joe Gibbs and the Redskins figure him out.
Yep.
86, though, they're missing McMahon because he's hurt after the I think Charles Martin body slam.
Yeah, the 4 seconds after the play stopped. It was a different NFL.
So. In 88, though, you're thinking they're the team because they have the home field advantage in the NFC. They had New Year's Eve, 1988. The Philadelphia Eagles come to town. And who's coaching the Eagles right now, Chris?
Oh, I don't know. In 88, who's coaching the Eagles? Was it
It's Buddy Ryan.
Was it Buddy?
It was Buddy.
Okay.
So, and this is the Fog Bowl game.
Oh, and this was the Fog Bowl game. Oh, my God, that's so good.
He wins Coach of the Year in 88 and has a heart attack. And
then
Fog Bowl. And they beat Philadelphia to go to the NFC Championship at home
and
again.
He's still technically young for this heart attack.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, he's what, 49?
Yeah.
I don't even think
he was
he's
40.
50.
I think he was 49 when he has this year.
Yeah. And then the following week, they get ass blasted by San Francisco.
By San Fran.
28-3.
And
then we start getting into kind of the end because all of those Super Bowl shufflers are getting older, playing for different teams.
Well, like you said, the 83 drafts solidified their team, and now if they're not drafting that heavy, if they're not getting these guys coming in, it's just not going to...
They're drafting late, and they never figured out a post-McMahon solution.
Yeah.
I mean, Jim Harbaugh's playing for him and playing decent, but the defense isn't there anymore like it used to be. So
yeah.
89, they go 6-10. They bounce back in 90 and 91. 90, they win the NFC Central, and they beat the Dome Patrol in the playoffs.
Oh, nice.
They lose the next week to New York by 28 points. And then in 91, they get the wild card, and they're upset by the Cowboys at home. And by 92, he's 5-11. He's fired.
He's gone.
And his doppelganger, Dave Wanstead from Pitt's coming into coaching with the mustache. But in his time with the Bears, he won 106 games. Second in franchise history. Probably will remain second forever.
Forever, yeah.
To George Halas.
And the only reason why is because he was coach for 20 years.
He coached when the NFL started and didn't stop till the 60s.
Exactly.
Law of averages say.
Yeah.
Especially when your team is winning multiple titles, with leather helmets.
It's true. And with Ditka.
And Ditka, because he's such a personality guy, from 93 to 96, he's just on TV.
Yeah, and he is a great on-camera personality. I think with his football knowledge, sometimes it gets away because sometimes you can just tell he wants to yell.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've gotten that where he's just sometimes when a guy just doesn't hit a route, you can tell he's just all right, so he didn't hit that right there. You're just yep.
They just cut away and use the cough button. Son of a bitch!
Exactly.
But by 97, he's got that hunger.
And he comes back.
He comes back January 28th, 1997. And he's hired by the New Orleans Saints, who fired Jim Mora in the wake of all the Dome Patrol guys leaving.
Yeah.
And, oh boy. Not
well, sometimes it just doesn't work. It's tough to say that he's not doing well as a coach in this it's just sometimes it doesn't work.
A rock bottom team.
Exactly.
Without a quarterback, without a hell of a lot of talent, and it definitely showed.
It was a straight up rebuild.
And I don't know if he anticipated. I thought he thought it would be a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah.
They finished 6-10 his first year. 98 they start 3-0. They're 6-7 at one point, but they end up losing their last two. They finished 6-10, and after 98, he's thinking, you know what? Instead of keeping going with this rebuild, we've got this great quarterback draft coming up in 1999. You know what this team really needs, Chris? And we did an episode where we discussed it. He basically wants to trade away everything in the franchise for Ricky Williams.
Yeah.
Who, don't get me wrong, borderline Hall of Fame player. But you're not making your team any better. by a
You're not building around a running back, and this is before running backs became unbelievably devalued. Where it's interesting to like look with rose-colored glasses now, because back then you're like, oh hell yeah,
you thought about it. You thought about drafting him top 10.
Yeah.
Should he have gone top 10? Yes, but using your entire draft and the next draft. Well,
I was just gonna say
so,
the selling the farm for him is one of the worst decisions.
So I don't know if it was out of desperation. I don't know if he was bored and just wanted to go golfing on draft weekend. We don't know, but the Saints are sitting at 12 overall. They offer essentially 9 to 10 picks to every single team in the top 5. Every single team. Cleveland says no, and they take Tim Couch, which we discussed was
Which is such a great pick.
horrible.
They might as well take in a couch.
I mean, at that point, but the Eagles take that guy from the Cosby Show, if you remember.
Yeah.
Eating at McDonald's every day. And then they offered to go from 12 to 3 to the Bengals.
You're not Donovan McNabb. Sorry, just that.
Is that the guy from the That is not the guy from the Cosby Show.
Hey, I'm Tiger Woods. It's so ridiculous.
This fits like dick skin.
I'm going to make that whore my wife.
I like I like finding denim and banging whores.
You're right, Charlie.
I'll have my milk steak boiled over hard. So
That's
they
right.
offered to go from 12 to 3 to Cincinnati. They offered them 9 picks.
9 picks.
9 picks, and Cincinnati said, look, we're totally in the middle of a rebuild, but this Achilles Smith guy, that's who we need.
It's pretty ridiculous.
It is the worst trade, because I think what would have happened if they would have taken them up on that offer, they would have had a chance to draft Drew Brees.
Oh, yeah.
Down the road.
Interesting.
I think that was that one, or they would have had a much more different quarterback situation for the positive.
At least a different quarterback situation.
Yes. So they end up offering Washington at 5. They give them all of their draft in 99. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then in 2000, their first and third round picks. Washington fucked up because they didn't build a dynasty with this.
Yeah.
But they went from 12, I think, back up to 7 to get Champ Bailey.
Oh,
who's in
yeah.
the Hall of Fame. So, like, they did right by that move.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
And what Ditka essentially did by doing this is turn the franchise into a laughingstock.
I mean, it really...
Even Ricky Williams with that ESPN, the magazine cover, and the bride's dress. Like,
it was bad.
It was a... They really didn't recover from that.
For years.
I mean, granted, in 2000, they made the playoffs and won their first playoff game. But it really hamstrung them.
Well, I was going to say, the overall landscape of them as a franchise for the next 3 or 4 years, they literally didn't have any picks.
Yeah, so they finished until they traded Ricky Williams to the Dolphins.
Yep.
But they finished the year 3-13. I did want to bring up in this because he was in one of our episodes on Christmas Eve '99. They beat the Cowboys, and in his first start, it was Jake Delhomme for the Saints that we talked about in that playoff game.
Nice.
Fired January 6, 2000.
Yep.
But yeah, he's back broadcasting now.
Yeah.
He's in movies. He's a personality icon, but that's what people see him more as opposed to a revolutionary player.
Yeah,
he was a revolutionary player.
Well, the tight end position would never have changed if it wasn't for him and his athleticism and really his ability to be that tight end where he can catch the ball and overpower people.
And he was a great blocker.
Yep.
It's not like the Bears didn't run the ball.
Exactly.
So, I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, definitely one of the best tight ends ever, just Mike Ditka. Mike Ditka.
Hall of Fame mustache.
That's right.